defines stalkerware as software used to facilitate intimate partner violence, abuse, or harassment, including pernicious intrusions into the targeted person's life by way of physical or digital actions. So stalkerware can include stalkerware itself, spyware, dual-use apps, and MRATs. So what are additional intimate partner surveillance tools, right? So we have, of course, the commodity stalkerware, we have the spyware, we have dual-use apps such as Find My Phone, right? MRAT, we have shared accounts, OSINT, social media. They can also leverage your friends and family, like, oh, you know, Zena said that she was gonna meet me at such and such a time, and she isn't here. Do you know where she is or what she's doing? Let's say, you know, I get back to my partner and they're like, where were you? What were you doing? You said you were at lunch, and I need to see a receipt with the timestamp, right? So they can use creative means to basically stalk your life, right? So commodity stalkerware, there's different levels. It's kind of like varying tiers or levels of payment. So, you know, on the low end, you get basic information like like call logs, maybe a little bit of the calendar, some chat apps, maybe some SMS, definitely browser history, right? GPS location, and then it kind of goes up from there, like all the way up to keystrokes, being able to get the lock screen code, and prices range from about 50 to 200 bucks monthly, quarterly, or even annual subscriptions. So what exactly does stalkerware like do? What do they take, right? So I did a little icon for a lot of the different things. Of course, browser history, like I said, Twitter, they can see all of that, Skype, your photos, all your videos, your voicemails, your emails, your photographs, your settings. They can even check your network settings and change it. Your battery life, they can listen to your surroundings. They can, of course, know your location, look at all your contacts, find out if you're on Wi-Fi, like it impacts Apple and Android devices. So there's a lot that stalkerware can do, and it's not good. Here's a list of various vendors, compliments of the Citizens Lab. They kind of give you a heads up, or I guess a shopping menu for abusers too, of like, I want to know her GPS, and I want to know, you know, like her calendar, so that I can see where she's at and who she's meeting with. And I want to know all of the different calls that she's made, who she's speaking to, who she's text messaging, all of that, right? So you can kind of pick what it is that you want or need or whatever want to know about your partner, right? So here's just some of the vendors and more. There's so many of them, like it's ridiculous. For instance, Moby Stealth. They provide information on how to disable two-factor authentication when accessing a victim's iCloud account. mSpy lets you hide the icon. FlexiSpy even reports when messages are deleted. So there's a lot, and each one does different things, right? Just depends what you want. So how does it work? How does it work exactly? So for commodity stalkerware, basically physical access is required to the device, internet access, and for Android devices, they need to have the ability to install apps from unknown sources, and Apple basically either a jailbroken phone or access to the iCloud account, right? So that's basically summed up, very simplified. And believe it or not, the Lockheed Martin kill chain can apply to stalkerware as well, commodity stalkerware. And I'll give you an example of Android right now. So you start out with reconnaissance, right? Information gathering on the target. I'll just use me as an example, right? find out what I like, what I would possibly click on, like dog pictures. I love dog and cat pictures. So of course, if I wanted to like see a closer up of the cute dog, I would click on the picture, right? So there's that. I'm a sucker. It's okay, I know. Weaponization. So they obtain the URL for Stalkerware, they purchase the service, or some of the Stalkerware vendors are so nice. They offer sometimes 24/7 service of being able to offer tech support to people that want to install Stalkerware on their partner or person's device. So delivery, obtain physical access to the targeted device. And that could be while they're sleeping, while they're in the shower, you know, through brute force methods. Like, if you don't give me your phone right now, that means you don't love me, right? And then finally, really, now we're in the exploitation phase. And there really isn't technical exploits per se for commodity stalkerware. It's more or less like a social engineering the target to get the phone, to unlock the screen. I had my iPhone, someone used dental mold on my iPhone to lift the prints on it to try to gain access. So it's just like, how can I convince her to leave her phone alone with me? Or how can I do it quickly enough while she's in the shower, right? Or do I suggest she has a longer shower? Stuff like that, right? Uh, and then basically you configure all the settings, right? And you install either from the Google Play Store or the vendor provided link. So it just depends. And then there's command and control, usually over Wi-Fi, sometimes over cell service. And then actions on objectives, right? So unauthorized access to data on the phone, exfil data, and possibly sometimes modified data. I know parts of my calendar were modified, so if that can happen to me, I'm sure that happened to other people. So to sum up, basically commodity stalkerware is easy to use, it's legal-ish, like, don't quote me on that, you know, consult a lawyer, blah, 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 all of that. It's cheap, it's readily available. I downloaded 2 samples earlier this week for free. And it has similar capabilities and permission requests as MRAT and spyware. And there's really no user interaction because the attacker does it, right? Because they have physical access. And then no really technical skill. And of course, the drawback is the attacker needs physical access to the phone. So here's the MRAT. It's cheap-ish, sometimes remote installation, but it requires specific knowledge to get the MRAT, right? To be able to get the user interaction, social engineer to click, and it does require technical skill. And it's illegal, so there's that too. And believe it or not, MITRE ATT&CK actually has TTPs that map back to various activities that Stalkerware and mobile rats do, and you can take a look at that. So Citizens Lab did a review of Stalkerware and basically stated that AV engines are horrible at detecting it. Horrible. Especially when Stalkerware comes out with new versions, like, oh my gosh, like the detection rate by AV vendors is like very, very slim. So yeah, having basically the same type of access as like a mobile rat and it being cheaper and less technical skill and not really detected by AV engines. For instance, the Truth Spy, newer versions of it in this particular report had 0%, 0% caught by AV. So that's definitely something to consider. So who are the targets? Morgan here says that the victims are everyday people like myself. I'm an everyday person. I am not a CEO, don't run multinational corporation. And the main target is relationships, obviously, because it has to do with intimate partner surveillance and domestic violence, right? But what if we take the similar characteristics of surveillance, because that's basically, I was surveilled for, almost 2 years, and the capabilities of Stalkerware as far as having access to information and data, and applying that to other targets. So we'll have a brief discussion of that. So for instance, children, the parenting apps, monitoring what their children are doing, where they're seeing, who they're talking to, their web history, all of that, right? Then we have employees, bosses wanting to know what the heck the employees are up to. There's a company that I worked for many years ago that put tracking devices on their employees' phones to find out where they were at, because they were usually around, driving trucks and doing that type of stuff. I'm not going to give away the employer. So they wanted to keep track of what the heck they were up to. The other one is journalists. So the Citizens Lab put out a report recently, I think it was a couple months ago, and they shared all the various journalists that were targeted by specifically NSO's group Pegasus, which is a advanced Stalkerware, super, super advanced, right? So an example of this is a Washington Post reporter was assassinated, and then the friends of this assassinated journalist were attacked or attempted to be attacked by NSO. They were sent, messages to try to compromise their device to see what type of communications were going on. So not only are the journalists targeted, but also the people that are close to the journalists. So that's not good. The other thing is dissidents. And in later recent events, so Black Lives Matter protesters were targeted in 2014 in downtown Chicago by law enforcement with Stalkerware. China uses WeChat to spy on their citizens. And recently, Hong Kong residents were targeted via a watering hole attack to install iPhone spyware. Religious leaders are even targeted by spyware and, Stalkerware. For instance, Tibetans working for the Dalai Lama, and also too Muslims targeted by Chinese hackers via a watering hole attack with iPhone exploits. The other people that are targeted are criminals, of course. Oh, here's a good story. So European law enforcement, they were using NSO's group spyware, Pegasus, via WhatsApp. And WhatsApp was like, what's going on, right? So they sent out a message to all the people that were impacted by this particular exploit and said, you've been hacked. So European law enforcement were using that to track a known terrorist. And when WhatsApp put out that message, the terrorist was like, oh, like, I'm dropping that phone. Yeah, I'm no longer communicating on that. And they went dark and the trail went cold. So it's used against terrorists. The other one is, so TikTok. TikTok is interesting. It's known as a dual use app, and it's actually been banned by the US Army, the US Navy. I believe the Pentagon also. Basically, they're like, yeah, no, NO to TikTok. And a report by Lookout describes an MRAT, and it's called Stealth Mango. And in it, they describe how government officials were targeted by this particular MRAT. And because those people were targeted, and government officials, of course, talked to other government officials and other, quote unquote, important people, those important people were also compromised as well. So that's not good. Operators. So the typical operators of Stalkerware are attackers, abusers. I was going to say mentally unstable people, but we won't go there. I don't need to be slinging insults, right? The other thing is through the Stalkerware vendor breaches, because, yeah, we'll talk about that later. Who was it? Motherboard. They filed a lawsuit against, or they filed a complaint actually against the Metropolitan Police, because through the breach of FlexiSpy, they realized that they were purchasing this particular software, right? And the Metropolitan Police refused to look into it, and it's unknown whether they were using it for official means or if they were using it against their partners or whatever, and they just used their police email. Who knows? Yeah, Ashley Madison, that's all I like to say. And then Moby Stealth, that was another compromise. And in that, let's see, the military, FBI, ICE, DHS, TSA, who knows, several branches of the military too were found in that dump. So we're going to do the same thing with targets as operators. So similar surveillance capabilities as Stalkerware, right? We have parents using it against their kids, and then schools as well. There was a $610,000 settlement from a school in Seattle that was trying to use the webcam of the students to spy on the students. And schools more and more are looking to bring on stalkerware or spyware to help combat school violence and to make sure that students are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So there's that. Companies. So the FTC actually banned Retina X from selling stalkerware. So that was good. And then in March-ish, when the COVID stuff went down, bosses were like, oh my God, how are we gonna, watch our employees, right? So they were scrambling to buy spy software to monitor their employees. So this is a very relevant thing that happens now, right now. Cybercrime, hacktivists, I don't need to go into that. So criminals also use spyware, stalkerware, and terrorists. So here's a good story. El Chapo loved to use spyware against his partners and leaders in his organization. But ultimately, the stalkerware, spyware, is what enabled the FBI to collect intel on him and take him down. So this is where paranoia does not pay. Law enforcement. So Miami police had its own stalkerware made called Penlink. The Swedish police got approval to install spyware on criminals' phones starting in March of 2020, so a couple months ago. And then City Lab revealed that Celebrate allows cops to gather visible and hidden or deleted data. And they also invest in cell phone interception devices. That's the official term, whatever. And then, of course, previously I shared how Motherboard filed a complaint against the Metropolitan Police of hey, you're using this. Why are you using this? And believe it or not, nation state threat actors. So previously I shared the Stealth Mango Lookout Report. And that was a nation state using stalkerware, spyware to surveil specific targets. And then also too, Reckless One, an APT group. So Javier Valdez Cardenas. He was known for investigating drug cartels. And so what happened was a few days after his death, assassination, his colleagues were actually targeted by Pegasus to by a Mexican APT to find out what the heck was going on. So yeah. So now we're going to get into a little bit of tradecraft of the various threat actors. So this one I'm calling Kimber. It's just your typical average, I guess, privacy violator that likes to use shared accounts, like shared email accounts, the I Find My Phone, dual use apps, and they try to unilaterally control and manipulate the situation, manipulate friends and family, and of course, emotional and psychological abuse, unethical use of social engineering. So the next flavor of threat actors that like to use this are the commodity stalkerware or spyware abusers. And of course, with this is included emotional and psychological abuse as well. And then we take it up a step with Electra. And Electra likes to use MRAT. They're a little bit more technical. They're up to date on social engineering techniques and you know, you know how some threat actors, they're like really super noisy, and you're like, wow, like they have no skill whatsoever, right? Well, these people, they know to like be quiet and listen and just wait for the opportune moment to strike or to take what it is that they want. And they also use emotional and psychological abuse as well. Finally, Poison Hydra. So this one likes to use physical threats / abuse / if you don't do this for me, you don't love me. If you don't do this, you can't see your kids again, on and on, right? And of course, emotional and psychological abuse again. So now we're to the CTI hypotheses and the normal use of commodity stalkerware. So with this, I recommend getting up to speed on what's in your environment so that you can better engage this emerging threat of stalkerware, which is a common suggestion, right? The other one is mobile device management and BYOD. Definitely taking a look at that and what you have going on. There's actually a really interesting report that came out recently, and I really want you to listen to what it is that I'm about to say. Checkpoint discovered that 75% of a multinational company's mobile devices were infected with an MRAT. And the way that the APT, attacker ended up doing that is they compromised their mobile device management server. And then what they did is they used that to push out an MRAT to all of the org's mobile devices. This is a big deal because when anyone accessed the corporate resources with creds, those creds, along with the 2FA codes, were compromised. So at the end of the story, the org had to do a factory reset for all mobile devices. This is something that I feel organizations aren't necessarily counting on happening. And I'm telling you now, be forewarned and be aware that this is possible, and to try to understand your landscape before it happens, if it does. So the other thing is stalkerware vendors, right? They notoriously have horrible security practices. I took just one, and I threw them into Shodan, and I was like, holy crap. I mean, it's pretty normal, for small businesses to have, RDP and SMB available to anyone on the internet. But yeah, it just takes, you know, one person to decide that they're bored, right? Um, and the other thing is misconfigs. They typically, a spy phone, for instance, they had an S3 bucket and API issue. KidsGuard had a misconfig on a server and lost like a ton of data. They get breached all the time by hacktivists. Like hacktivists hate Stalkerware vendors. So it's just basically a matter of time. Sometimes the transmission of the data is unencrypted. You know, man in the middle might be possible. And also, too, notable mention, the hacking team that sells spyware to governments was hacked. And then Gamma International was hacked too. And documents on Finn Fisher, a government spy tool, was released. So here are just some of the Stalkerware vendor breaches. Retina X was breached 2 times. Flexi Spy, Moby Stealth, Spymaster Pro, Spy Human, Spy Phone, Hello Spy, The True Spy, Family Orbit, M Spy, Copy 9, XNOR, blah, you can read it a lot. So this made me think, like, there are statistics out there based on what domestic violence, you know, what the portion of the population is. So what I decided to do was take, I don't know, let's say a sample size of about 20,000 employees, right? And I split it into 50-50 just because let's not get into all that, right? And so the domestic violence, since Stalkerware is generally directed towards people that are affected by domestic violence, so women, 1 out of 3, women are impacted by domestic violence, and men, 1 out of 6. So let's take those figures, right? So 50-50% times 20,000 times 33% for women, that's give or take 3,000 employees, right? And then men, 1,667. So the other statistic is that approximately 54% of domestic violence victims are tracked with Stalkerware, according to the NNEDV, which is a domestic violence organization that helps people. So if you take all those numbers and you take all those figures and you multiply it by 0.54, that gets 13.5% of your employees were impacted by Stalkerware at one point in their lives, give or take. So why would we care? And it's at some point in their lives, right? So the reason why this is a big deal is that I'll give you 2 brief scenarios. So the first one is ransomware actors, right? So they've kind of shifted their tactics again. And let's say you're a big company, right? And you're a third-party vendor that has like higher critical data gets compromised. And the ransomware actor is like, oh, you know, we looked through the third-party vendor's data and we saw that we had really sensitive data or information from big company X over here, right? Let's try to extort them. So how difficult would it be for these ransomware actors to compromise a Stalkerware vendor, right? And sift through all of the data and go after these companies that have sensitive data that wasn't supposed to be leaked in the first place, thanks to Stalkerware, and then try to extort them, right? The other angle to look at is that let's take ransomware out of the picture. Let's take all of that out of the picture, and let's just say that the Stalkerware vendor is breached, right? And people recognize or realize that some of the data that is in there is related to your organization, and let's say that it's damaging, right? Or it could serve as additional proof for lawsuits or God knows what. So that's also another angle to consider. So here are some CTI hypotheses of repurposed use of stalkerware. So insider threats, right? They can install hacking tools on personal devices, install stalkerware, and attempt to pivot onto the corporate network through IoT, printer, or some other weakness. The other thing is data exfil. If I have stalkerware on my personal device, and I want to get these out, whatever this document, whatever this meeting, and I want to get it out of the organization, but I can't because of DLP or God knows what, right? So if I just take stalkerware in there and hold my phone up, like that's easy, right? The other thing is unintentional insider threats. So those are the people that are in domestic violence situations that are just leaking data and not intentionally. So it could be non-intentional too. The other thing is executives and employees. So for instance, Jeff Bezos's iPhone, his iPhone, it was hacked, and it gave the attackers access to his photos and texts. I mean, if he can get hacked, right? So that's something to consider as well. Competitors can track, especially maybe not necessarily in the age of COVID, but let's say non-COVID, and they're tracking your CEO or one of the strategic individuals at your organization and who they're meeting with, to possibly discern like insider information, insider trading, business negotiations, all of that. So that's something to consider as well. The next one, industrial espionage. I'm not gonna name names here, but hopefully this slide kind of speaks for itself. So stalkerware or repurposed stalkerware gives nation states and other countries an easy in to do whatever they want as well. So what are some solutions that corporate America can have, right? So Citizens Lab, they put out a report, a page 37, 38 or so, and there's some IOCs in there that you can use. The other thing, to block and to make sure that they're properly categorized, to see if there's traffic in your environment. And I'll talk more about this in a little bit. And then also too, make sure or at least encourage employees not to jailbreak their phones, not to use WeChat or TikTok. So those are some things to consider. Another thing you can do are tabletops. So you can think about, let's say, the average employees walking around or your CISO or someone like that, right? And you think, how can I monetize this data if I was able to steal it? So having a tabletop on that, in the event of poor security practices, which will happen, of stalkerware vendors, and let's say that they have a misconfigured S3 bucket and your data is just sitting up there and you didn't know about it until, some security researchers like, yo, your data is up here. And then you try to reach out to the stalkerware vendor, but like they're not taking takedown requests. Like what do you do? Like how do you escalate in your organization? The other thing is previously, how I spoke about ransomware actors, like what happens if they try to extort your organization for a third party getting compromised and them finding they have your sensitive data? What do you do? And then the other thing is the mobile device management. So how would an attacker compromise your mobile device management server? Do you have a server? What's your solution? Do you not have a solution? Like, what would you do? you know, how would you analyze the APKs? Like how would you deal with it if 75% of your mobile devices that had, you know, your 2FA token and all that other stuff got compromised? Like, think about that. So awareness, Chris Cox and Operation Safe Escape, they have a wonderful thing going on. I would definitely check out what they do. I have links on here. Also to stopstalkerware.org. It's a part of EFF and AVA, and a bunch of like different companies, AV vendors get together and they're like, yeah, stalkerware is bad and we should probably like do something about it. So they're doing something about it. Some suggestions is, you know, never leave your cell phone unattended, always delete unused applications, apps on your phone, regularly search for suspicious apps as well, use a quality password manager, and then change your smartphone passcodes regularly. Don't jailbreak your phone, and existing AV and spyware tools are kind of ineffective, so don't necessarily rely on that. And for Android, what you want to do is check the device administrators, make sure that Google Play Protect is not disabled, and look to see if install apps from unknown sources is enabled. If that's enabled, like, you got problems. So some resources for corporate America, tallpoppy.io, they have a wonderful program that works with corporate America to deal with these specific situations of technological abuse and dealing with stalkerware and all of that. I'd suggest checking them out. Safeescape.org, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, NNEDV, stopstalkerware.org. Also, too, Cornell Tech, they have a client-centered clinical computer security practice to help people. They have a tech consultation questionnaire as well. So, you know, we learned about stalkerware, we learned about spyware, MRAT, dual-use apps. Basically, it's an emerging threat that can impact and has impacted corporate America, from CEOs down to employees, down to 75% of the mobile devices at an organization. So you need to do organization-specific threat modeling, especially since there's suboptimal AV detection. Like, you can't rely on the AV vendors right now, or, well, we won't get into that, but definitely do not rely on the AV vendors for stalkerware detection. Like, just don't. Thank you so much, but wait, there's something weird with that slide. What's going on? Technical difficulties. While listening to this music. Hold on 1 second. Oh, good. Okay, we got that settled. So where were we? Oh, we were gonna talk about reverse engineering Android APKs. Okay, so let's say on the off chance, you know, you get something in your organization and you're like, crap, like, I have to learn how to reverse engineer these, like, out of the blue, because a bunch of people got impacted and we can't upload it to VirusTotal because, well, we can't, right? So what I did, I used Chamaud X's YouTube videos and explanation where she goes through tools and goes through some general techniques that you would need to reverse engineer APKs. So I'm going to show you the difference between the two so that you can know if I can do it in an evening, so can you. So don't be scared, and you got this. So the first one, APK tool. So I use that to decompile the APK that I picked. I'm not going to name which one. And basically on here, you can see the various permissions from the Android manifest file that I managed to get. And so it describes, you know, like the different things that I can get. So I'm going to read it here, like the call log data, SMS. I can write and read to external storage. Like I can check the network state, the contacts, the camera. I can read the calendar. Okay, cool. So we got that. So in the decompiled, you know, APK, there was something called classes.dex. And I was like, I need to read that, but I can't read the dex file. So what I used dex to jar to convert it to a jar file so that I could later read the contents in JD GUI. So then, as you can see, there are highlighted the hard-coded URL that was in that particular APK. So now let's say that your org isn't in danger and you just want to dabble and you're curious about what's going on with Stalkerware APKs anyways, right? So here's the quick and easy when you don't necessarily have to be concerned about privacy issues or anything like that. So I went to decompiler.com. I uploaded the Stalkerware APK, and oh, lo and behold, there are, you know, permissions on there. Almost it's exactly the same that I got for manually doing it. So next, I uploaded that particular sample to VirusTotal. It got hit by 11 out of 61 engines. Still not very good. Yeah. So then what I did is I looked at the permissions. So it gives you the permissions, so you don't have to decompile it, all of that. You get that information right there. And then it also gave me the interesting strings. So that was also very helpful. And just for giggles, I threw it into hybrid analysis and I got the TTPs. So if you, let's say you don't have to manually assign the TTPs, right? You just want to know for the hell of it. It does that for you. So you can throw the sample up there. And just for fun, I started doing Ghidra and using that to reverse engineer too. But then I was like, well, I already have all the data I need, and like I have other projects I need to work on. So it's tons of fun, and it's definitely something that I'll come back to and learn how to do in Ghidra as well. So now we are going to pivot and look at OSINT and other stuff. So I took what I had, right? I had the IOX and information from Citizens Lab, and a lot of that data was pulled in 2018. As we all know, IOX can get old, allegedly. So I started there. And as we go along this, I started creating a list and putting all the stuff I found in the list, which I'm sharing with all of you later. So I threw a random, you know, email. I threw them all into VirusTotal, and then I went to the files that were related to that as well. And you can see that I highlighted it there. And then I clicked on it and I was like, oh, look, another domain of something that's related to Stalkerware, right? So I included that on the list as well. And then the next phase was going through each and every single Stalkerware vendor that was breached and seeing what I could find on VirusTotal that was related to them. And then, I don't know if you've been on Twitter lately, but there was a big, you know, InfoSec Twitter was like, how dare you? This one publishing company article and it had to do with spying on your wife. So I was like, okay, I'll use that as a Google search and see what comes up. So I went through item by item by item and pulled out the relevant information and searched in VirusTotal and then added it to a list. Next step, Google Play Store. So I typed in like a name of like a popular spyware, and then a bunch of options popped up. So I just clicked on various options and I looked for websites that were related to the developer, went there and then pivoted off of that. The other thing is SSL certs. In this one, I typed in FlexiSpy and got 2 additional domains. And so interestingly enough, these 2 domains, they more or less gave a rundown of like what the various Stalkerwares did, what you get for your money, like why you want to use one over another, all of that. So I added those domains to the list just because, like, yeah, bad. Next, I looked at the security researchers. So NS Crew Tables, he has an awesome GitHub page with a ton of information. He's given talks on this subject. Like, he's super passionate about it. I highly recommend checking him out if you get a chance. He knows his stuff. And he also had IOCs on there that I updated and searched and added, and then made him the contributor for those. And here's another one. I used the hashtag Stalkerware and APK, and amazingly, NS Crew Tables popped up with like detailed information of like, Stalkerware. So I added whatever IOCs I could pull out of that to the list as well. Another search that I did, malware hunter team, goes without speaking, right? They're freaking awesome. So I entered that and then APK into Twitter, and bam, like a huge, you just keep scrolling, and in the post they go like, not very good detection, like warning, warning, warning. So I pulled some of those IOCs out and added it to the list, and then provided proper attribution to them. The other thing, so with all of these URLs, just to, keep things neutral or whatever, I went to Lenny Zelter's website, and on there he has like a long list of like how to look up malicious websites, right? So I picked 2 randomly. I'm not beating up on anyone. I didn't single whatever blah, right? So the first one I tried was Bright Cloud, and it was the truthspy.com. It was like a really big Stalkerware name where like, if you know anything about Stalkerware, like that one's kind of popular. So with that one, I threw that in there and it came back as malicious and hacking and keylogger. And then I was like, well, that's good news, right? But then I threw the same domain into IBM X-Force, and it came back as education and health. So after this talk, I'm going to go and suggest an edit on that one. So just think about your proxy and what's going on at your organization. Are your employees allowed to shop for Stalkerware while on company time and on your company device? Things like that. So there was a lot of information in here and a lot of research went into this talk. So what I did is I created a website. It'll be tweeting out, I think now-ish, from my account. And it's sites.google.com/view/Stalkerware. And on there, I have a takeaway section where I did a threat summary report for y'all to include in your threat intelligence platform, or to copy paste and do whatever you want with it. And then I also have the indicators of compromise as well. And then I also have a form of submission of, give me your Stalkerware IOCs so that we can add them to the list if you feel like it. And then I have a contact me page as well. And I included 2 videos. So the first one is from BBC, and they a lady reporter is given a phone to watch her male colleague for, I think it was 2 days. So you get to see, like, when I said I was surveilled, give or take, for about 2 years, like, you get to see in 2 days what I lived with for almost 2 years. And it gives you a good perspective of what employees, what your employees might go through, people in domestic violence situations, how it can be used against your organization. So definitely check that out. And then also too, for just a general overview, Stop Stalkerware, the Coalition Against Stalkerware, they did a really good video that was released recently, so I also linked that on the page. And if you hate Google Sites, I also created a GitHub as well, specifically for this, where I uploaded the IOCs in a CSV format, so you can easily get the data without having to use try to get it from a PDF, right? And then also the threat summary report. So it's at github.com/ch33r10/stalkerware, all lowercase. So we're at the end. Thank you so much for coming to my talk. Thank you everyone involved with the help of the research, putting this together, putting the conference together, sticking with me till the end. That's me, and you'll find me on the Twitters. And there's that as well. I will, Black Lives Matter. And definitely, if you get a chance, try to look at some Black-owned businesses and see how you can incorporate that into your like normal buying schedule. I did. So finally, I will upload these slides as well. There's a ton of references on a per slide basis. And then those are all the references that I condensed for y'all. And then of course, research. Thank you so much. And that's it.
Thank you, Cheerio.